Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into a forensic breakdown of the 2026 Chunghwa toxic oil crisis. If you've been following the food industry at all, you already know this wasn't just some minor hiccup at one company. No, this sent absolute shockwaves through an entire nation's supply chain. So we're going to break down exactly how a heavily certified system completely collapsed, look at the very real health risks involved, and, most importantly, explore how we can actually use legal reform and AI to stop the next disaster.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the 2026 toxic oil crisis itself, then look at the health risks of BAP. After that, we'll map out the anatomy of those QC failures, talk about reforming food safety laws, and wrap up with the AI quality revolution.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the 2026 toxic oil crisis, a systemic cover-up that shocked the nation.
We often think of food safety failures as sudden, accidental slip-ups, right? But what happened here was a prolonged, systemic failure of transparency. Just look at the sheer speed of this disaster. It kicked off in April 2026 when a massive 1,300 tons of contaminated soybean oil were produced and shipped out. Now, by mid-June, downstream checks actually caught the issue. But instead of doing the right thing and triggering a public recall, a devastating 47-day cover-up began. It wasn't until July 1st that regulators finally stepped in, forcing these massive recalls that ultimately led to the destruction of over 7,700 tons of oil by late July.
And the financial devastation? It was absolutely staggering. We're talking about up to 3 billion NTD in economic losses rippling across the industry. As for the company responsible, they were slapped with a record-breaking 171.2 million NTD administrative fine. This was not just a quality control issue. It was a literal economic earthquake for the whole food manufacturing sector.
Moving to Section 2, Health Risks of BAP, Understanding the Invisible Threat.
Now, you might be wondering, why did the authorities react with such unprecedented force? Well, it all comes down to the chemistry. The specific culprit here is Benzo pyrene, or BAP for short. It's a confirmed Group 1 carcinogen. It forms during incomplete combustion or when processing hits excessive high temperatures. Long-term exposure to this stuff is known to increase the risk of lung, liver, and stomach cancers. Because it's a known carcinogen, public health operates on a strict precautionary principle. There is absolutely zero tolerance for this in our daily food staples.
And this is exactly where the alarm bells really went off. When the downstream testing was done, they found BAP levels at a shocking 8.1 micrograms per kilogram. To put that into perspective, the legal safety ceiling is just 2.0. So this product wasn't just slightly over the line, it was carrying more than 4 times the legally permitted maximum of a known cancer-causing agent. Just let that sink in.
All right, Section 3, Anatomy of QC Failures, How Multiple Layers of Defense Collapsed.
So how does a company that is heavily decorated with ISO, HACCP, and SQF certifications actually let this happen? It really comes down to a massive structural conflict inside the company itself. On one hand, you've got procurement KPIs heavily focused on slashing costs and keeping a cheap supply flowing. On the other hand, you have quality assurance KPIs battling to maintain safety and compliance. When a corporate culture lets cost-cutting override safety, the QA department basically loses its power. And this toxic culture bled into the whole supply chain, to the point where downstream buyers were literally just ignoring expired safety certificates because, well, the price was right.
It's a classic Swiss cheese failure. Multiple safeguards failing all at once. First up, procurement secretly altered the intake contracts to accept degraded beans. Then, during an equipment upgrade meant to boost yield, they entirely bypassed the HACCP hazard analysis, so critical temperature and pressure controls went totally unchecked. Third, to cover the whole thing up, their internal ISO 17025 certified lab allegedly falsified the testing data. And finally, the downstream food manufacturers completely failed their own incoming quality control. They were just blindly buying the oil without verifying the expired paperwork.
Let's take a closer look at that first step because it's pretty staggering. The company secretly relaxed their acceptance standard for heat-damaged, degraded soybeans from 0.5% up to 5%. That is a 10-fold increase. By accepting beans that were already compromised or partially combusted during poor storage, they introduced massive BAP risk right at the source, all just to save a few bucks on raw materials.
And that brings us to the ultimate lesson here. An illusion of safety is actually worse than no safety at all.
Having a wall of impressive international certifications doesn't mean a thing if someone can just alter a paper contract, skip a machine upgrade review, or fake a spreadsheet in a lab. Plain and simple, human negligence completely shattered the trust in those paper certificates.
Which brings us to Section 4, Reforming Food Safety Laws, Closing the Legal Loopholes.
Because internal corporate culture failed so spectacularly here, the law has to step in to protect the public. The big question for lawmakers is, how do we legally stop companies from using internal retesting as an excuse to hide a public health crisis for almost 2 months? In this case, they knew there was a problem but just sat on it. We desperately need a system that forces immediate transparency.
So, the proposed amendments to the Food Safety Act are rigorous, and they directly target the failures we just talked about. First, Article 7 is being updated to mandate a super strict 24-hour compulsory reporting window. Basically, the second you see a dangerous lab result, you report it. Period. Second, Article 47 raises the fine ceiling for hiding information from 3 million to a whopping 30 million NTD, totally wiping out the financial incentive for a cover-up. And finally, Article 41 formalizes the rules for precautionary takedowns. This gives regulators the clear legal authority to pull suspicious products off shelves right away, instead of waiting weeks for an investigation to wrap up.
And now, Section 5, the AI Quality Revolution, Automating Trust and Integrity.
But laws alone just aren't enough. We really need a digital revolution in quality control to take human error and intentional tampering completely out of the equation. We have to ask ourselves, can AI and connected tech proactively stop this kind of tampering in our food supply chains? Like, can we build a factory system that literally refuses to manufacture a toxic product, even if a manager is telling it to?
The cool thing is, these solutions are super practical, and they're already starting to roll out. For example, AI computer vision at the intake facility can auto-detect bad, heat-damaged beans before they even make it into the silo, totally bypassing subjective human inspections. Then you have natural language processing, or NLP, which can automatically scan hundreds of supplier contracts to flag illegal spec changes, like someone secretly changing that 0.5% to 5%. And maybe the most impressive part, advanced edge AI can monitor critical control points. If a temperature drops in a deodorization tower, the AI physically locks the production valves. The contaminated oil literally cannot move to the next stage. No exceptions.
Most importantly, though, we have to fix the laboratory tampering. It is absolutely crazy that million-dollar precision chemistry machines were defeated by someone just editing a simple spreadsheet. But by connecting equipment like GCMS directly to a government or third-party food cloud, we guarantee a digital chain of custody. The machine generates the raw data and uploads it instantly, locked with a digital signature. It completely bypasses human spreadsheets, making the falsification of lab data literally impossible.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. In an era where public health relies entirely on the integrity of data, isn't it time we stop trusting easily manipulated paper certificates? By combining rigorous legal reform with immutable AI-driven data systems, we can rebuild our food safety network so that it runs on mathematical certainty rather than human compromise. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and stay curious.